Welcome to Catholicsplaining. Prepare yourself. You are about to be Catholicsplained. Yes, you are precious. We're Catholicsplaining the Pope's Encyclical Magnifica Humanitas, which is a pretty good encyclical so far from what I'm reading. Folks, I hate to say fake news, but a lot of people were calling it an anti-AI thing, not necessarily anti-AI. And the whole thing is about Magnifica Humanitas. And the Holy Father goes through a lot of things. For example, the Rerum Novarum, I think it's the 125th anniversary of it. I don't know. I remember the 100th anniversary. Pope John Paul II, St. John Paul II, had written about it. And of course, it was a great work for its time. I've already done the introduction. Now I'm going to be reviewing and commenting and inviting the audience to do so as well. The next part, chapter 2. Or no, rather, it's chapter 1. Him more than anybody else, I think the more that we do primary sources with him, it's the best. Twitter is unfortunate. X, rather, is unfortunate because his official account will do like excerpts from his speeches or from his Wednesday audience, which isn't always the best representation of it. I noticed they have started to do the links with the full speech, but who reads the full speech? I know we have boomers running these things. Technically, Pope Leo is a boomer. He's our first boomer pope. But how do I say this? I don't want to fall into the necessary trap that a lot of people throw at me. It's like, oh, it's out of context. It's out of context. But sometimes it really is. It truly is. And we need to get to know Leo. We're still getting to know Leo. I was getting to know Francis for quite a while. And part of the reason why Pope Francis may not always be spoken of by me, or rather what his lack of prudence is in regard to the Latin Mass. And eventually I will be getting Odin on to discuss this. There was no reason for him to do what he did to the Latin Mass. I think if he hadn't, we all might have had a bit of a different attitude about a lot of things. But if you bring the full force of the papacy down on, checks notes, people that like going to Mass in a way you're allowed to go to Mass and are being really edified, and it's really beautiful and it's great and everybody loves it, that's just insane. And I think unprecedented in the history of our church. They use the excuse, people that I do not believe are our friends within the Curia, of a few very loud, very obnoxious engagement farmers. And we're like, see, look, this is how they are. This is their attitude. We even had this in my parish in a place that I shall not name, undisclosed location, where there was 2 people that were causing so much trouble because they were constantly trolling and just being awful to the archbishop and being really loud, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, everyone's going to think that this is what all the Latin Mass people are, but it is not. But that's not what we're talking about here today. But just keep that in mind. I'm still getting to know Leo. I like so far what I'm reading here. When you read it within the light of the church and how he is speaking, I think it's good. Some people are saying, I've seen, well, why doesn't he preach the gospel more often? It's like, well, he kind of is. I've noticed my boomer dad, love him to death. When I say boomer, again, if you get your news from non-traditional sources, he's like, why doesn't he ever speak against abortion? All he ever speaks about is this. And I'm like, Dad, all the time. But what is reported on the news that he watches, it's only one thing. And of course, we've also learned that something that rhymes with Fox News is not necessarily a friend of the church right now for some very odd reasons, which I'm going to be getting into. I'm going to be starting a series called The Heresy Files. And the Heresy Files is going to be about, well, heresy, but like kind of like the X Files, but the Heresy Files. First one I'm going to do is dispensationalism. But that's, I guess, an introduction that I want to say into how I'm going to be doing this. I'm not going to be critical of the Holy Father until I need to be. I'm pretty cool with this, what I've been reading so far. Magnifica, Humanitas. I think that this is something that we need to really read. Also, folks got to know that, realize, this dude's an Augustinian. And he is definitely more media savvy than our previous popes. I really, 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 and I'm just going to say really love John Paul II and Benedict the 16th. They really knew what we needed. I mean, the boom that they gave to the church. And they were the only dudes that were at Vatican II. And they were the ones that gave us the Latin Mass. I'm going to go on and on about it because it's just such a big deal. I'm going to keep harping on it. Eventually, but I don't know. I know Cardinal Burke has been dialoguing with the Holy Father, and I think when he's talking about dialogue here, he might be a little more open. So we shall see. But let's go ahead and let's get into chapter 2. I'm going to quit harping. I'll tell you, people need to understand dispensationalism. Sometimes I would mention that to people, and I'm like, and they don't know what I'm talking about. And I'm like, you're going to understand what's happening with some of the politics and certain people within a certain administration if you understand that this is their outlook. But we're going to talk about a dynamic, can I talk? A dynamic approach faithful to the gospel. All right. I'm going to say my first thing. The gospel. The gospel. Again, so why doesn't he preach about the gospel? He's talking about the gospel. He is falling a little bit into the trap of definitely what you see in American Catholicism, something that I noticed when I came into the Catholic Church 30 years ago. Has it been 30 years? Maybe it's been 30 years. I don't know. A long time. They assume that people know this. They assume that people were catechized well because they were catechized well. So when the Holy Father says the gospel, I think he's taking for granted that people know what the gospel is and know what the gospel is as preached. What I would say is the truth, but, justification. Like how many Catholics do you know that were able to just say the Catholic version of justification and be able to do that? They weren't necessarily taught that, but the gospel. So he is talking about the gospel. He's just assuming people know what that means. To be fair to him, though, that's not his intention here. He's very much like a teacher. I like that. That's what I liked about Benedict the 16th as well. In this first chapter, I intend to present synthetically how the social doctrine of the Church has taken shape in the recent papal magisterium and in the Second Vatican Council. So what he's talking about is the social doctrine of the Church. That's what he's going into to demonstrate its dynamic character. Indeed, in each era, the res novae require that this teaching address historical questions in light of revealed truth. Again, revealed truth. The Holy Father is assuming that everyone knows what this means. Not a criticism, but he's just saying it as though everyone knows what we're talking about. The gospel, revealed truth. Okay, this is perfectly faithful and this is perfectly Catholic. He's not running away from this. He's just assuming people know what revealed truth is. True story. Every now and then, the priest during his homily will be all, I just want to ask, can anyone tell me what grace is? Raise your hand. Someone says something, it was the wrong answer. Then finally I raise my hand and I get it right. Why? Because I'm a convert. Converts, we're annoying that way. One of the older people behind me said, "Oh, I was going to say this." And it was the exact answer from the Baltimore Catechism. So if you were really old and catechized, then you know what it is. But yes, revealed truth. In this regard, artificial intelligence. So what's the Holy Father talking about? Artificial intelligence. 2, should not be considered as merely yet another theme to be studied or a crisis to be managed. I like this. I get very annoyed with non-proactive things. As a teacher, it annoyed the living daylights out of me. It was always reactive, not proactive. Proactive solved a lot of problems in the classroom, and I believe they also call it in the world. In this regard, artificial intelligence too could not, or crisis to be managed, but rather as a development. It's a development that challenges the categories of social doctrine from within, calling for their future development in fidelity to the gospel. So we have the social doctrine of the church. Oh, by the way, he mentions papal magisterium. How many people can define that? Yeah, he's assuming we know what this means. Papal magisterium, social doctrine of the church, the gospel, revealed truth with a capital T, and fidelity to the gospel. Okay, I'm going to be fair to the Holy Father now, to Leo the 14th. Encyclicals really aren't written to the faithful. Encyclicals are written technically to the bishops. So he can be forgiven for this. Hypothetically, bishops know what this means. This overview, however, would not be very comprehensive if before reflecting on the contribution of individual popes and their most relevant documents, we do not first clarify some fundamental principles concerning the way in which the church exists in history. Yeah, I like what he's doing here, the church. And notice he always says church with a capital C, and relates to the world. Failing to do so would expose social doctrine to the risk of being perceived as an undue interference in worldly matters or an external code of ethics imposed from above. That was a criticism that Pope Leo XIII got. Church is interfering. Church is getting involved with things they have nothing to do with. Just stick to the gospel. Stick to that. Or perhaps even looking in the past when maybe it was a little too enthusiastic. What I would say, if I were the Pope, I would add, neither should the social gospel, the social doctrine of the church, be viewed as some sort of utopianism, like that we can actually bring heaven on earth. We cannot. As Tolkien says, J.R.R. Tolkien, history is one long defeat. We get glimpses of the final victory. But utopian means no place. That's the work of St. Thomas More. No heaven on earth from a human or worldly point of view. Maybe he'll talk about that later. In reality, it stems from a church that walks alongside humanity, recognizes the autonomy of earthly realities and the distinction between ecclesiastical and political communities. Indeed, it is for this very reason that she strives to serve the common good. Church needs to serve the common good in the social doctrine of the church. I'll say it again. Some of the criticism, where's the gospel being preached? He's telling us, I'm talking about the social doctrine of the church here, kids. That's what we're going into. And look who it is. It's Sean Sue. I have to rewatch later, but I can leave it running in the background right now. Oh, so well, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. You know that I do need the watch hours. I'm so happy to be back. For those of you that do not know, I did lose my cat in a very, I hate to use the word traumatizing, but actually it was because I didn't expect it. I knew he wasn't feeling well. I knew he was old. But my other cat that I had to put to sleep, I knew it was coming for quite a while. She had kidney failure. what it did, it turned out that my cat, the reason why he wasn't feeling well and wasn't eating and was starting to hide was because he had cancer. He had several tumors. And I didn't necessarily have time to prepare. I did my best to say goodbye, but I did put him to rest right when we got the diagnosis. I mean, there was no way. And the fact that he obviously was suffering, that what he was suffering from and why he was hiding in the weirdest places, like hiding behind the toilet, which is, just the weirdest place for him to hide, way in the furthest corner of my house. So, yes, it was really hard. So I kind of had to go get my mojo back. And now I'm back, and I just love talking about this because this is my life's work. I am an essayist, though I haven't published an essay 10 years now, but that's okay. That's okay. Hello, hope you are well. I am well. We're talking about the social doctrine of the church. We're talking about Leo the 14th, and of course, I was just talking about my kitty cat because I can't stop talking about him. I will eventually. Got mojo back. 800 people in D&D. Yes, indeed. Though we do not endorse that in real life. Here on Catholicsplaining, we do not endorse that in real life. But yes, if you are role-playing a Western especially and playing gang members, yes, you should. So keep in mind, we're talking about the social doctrine of the church. Unfortunately, it got hijacked by a bunch of, boomers, for lack of a better word. I'm not bashing boomers, but yeah, I mean, look at the stuff that happened in the church in the 70s and 80s, and we kind of started getting things back on track. But when people hear social doctrine of the church, I think they get rightly triggered. Get a version of PTSD. I do too, and I missed most of it. Thank goodness. Yeah, that the church in her social doctrine strives to serve the common good. A church journeying through human history. The church is present in the world as a sign of unity for the entire human family. Yeah, the church is like a sacrament. What's the word? It's a sacrament, but not a sacrament. But it's a sacrament, but not like one of the 7 sacraments. I forget what it's called. She recognizes today's questions. Yeah, we have a visible church, something you can see. It's not invisible. She recognizes today's questions and challenges as a current setting in which to carry out her particular vocation of listening, dialogue, and service, which are good things. However, I even got triggered when I read that because it's been hijacked. But if you put your blinders on and forget how it's been hijacked by unfortunate individuals, nothing wrong with listening, nothing wrong with dialogue, nothing wrong with service. And being responsive to everything concerning the lives of contemporary men and women. Yeah. This involvement in people's lives helped the church understand ever more clearly that her mission has a historical scope and entails a responsibility for the way in which social relations are built. Okay. For this reason, she cannot consider herself a stranger to the forces shaping society. Yeah, we can't just sit around and metaphorically get within ourselves, wall ourselves off from the world. And, well, the more I say that, the more comforting and the more tempting that is, according to your vocation. Luckily, my vocation is not that. On the contrary, the church actively participates in the processes by which society grows and is organized. Yeah. And she offers her own contribution to the creation of more just and fraternal society. Think of this in history where you look at the university system. Look at the great social help, helping the poor. St. Vincent de Paul. You have the hospitals. All of that came from religious orders and sometimes lay orders. He quotes Pope Francis here, and I'm trying not to be triggered. Like I said, if only Pope Francis had left the Latin Mass alone. No one can demand that religion should be relegated to the inner sanctum of personal life, without influence on societal and national life, without concern for the soundness of civil institutions, without a right to offer opinion on events affecting society. Yeah. So when people tell us to shut up, it's like, sorry, we're not. And right now we have a weird situation where it's coming from both the left and the right. The left wants us to shut up about social, quote unquote, social issues, and the right now is wanting us to shut up about other national issues. That's not our job. Everyone has a right to offer an opinion. Again, out of context, this is, nothing wrong here. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Wow, we got 8 people. That's fantastic. It's Snortopupus Career. Thank you. Thank you for being here. And yeah, Snortopupus and Shansu, they're also members on my other channel. A church journeying through human history. The church is present in the world as a sign of unity for the entire human family. Oh, wait, we already said that. Okay. The church's vocation and duty to accompany humanity in the specifics of history leads her to recognize that earthly realities possess their own proper character and order. Indeed. The Second Vatican Council expressed this principle with particular precision in the Pastoral Constitution Gaudium et Spes. Don't we know this? If by the autonomy of earthly affairs is meant that created things and societies themselves enjoy their own laws and values, then the demand for autonomy is perfectly in order. Okay. This affirmation shows that creation bears the imprint of an original goodness that our human outlook must preserve. Yeah. We do not believe in the complete desolation either of man or of the world. That it is inherently good, not inherently bad. That's in contrast to some points of view that came from communities derived from the Reformation. Okay. We believe it is wounded through concupiscence and all sorts of things, original sin, whatever, but that it is actually inherently good. I lost my place. And that the human outlook must preserve, cultivate, and bring to fulfillment. The church offers herself in a way that helps to interpret reality in all of its depth. She supports with humble firmness the choices that promote the dignity of every person, the cohesion of communities, and the good of all. Yeah, and dignity of every person. We know what that means because the Holy Father said it to the Spanish Parliament, from conception to natural death. Oh, hello. Thank you for being here, everybody. The cohesion and goodness of all. The church thus stands alongside the world without overpowering it. I'm getting a little annoyed. I know where the Holy Father, where Leo's coming from, but listen, we are done apologizing for things that happened 1,000 years ago, okay? We said we were sorry, all right? But maybe people need to hear that. So that the promise of justice and peace that the Holy Spirit continues to sustain in the heart of humanity may come to fruition in every human endeavor. Holy Spirit. Recognizing that God upholds the freedom of men and women in the unfolding of history. Yes, we believe in free will. That is also something that is in contrast to those communities that definitely the opinions of the reformers at the time of the Reformation. We believe in free will. For some reason, people think it's the other way around. I blame television and stuff. Remember, television is not real life. The Second Vatican Council affirmed the distinction between the ecclesial community and the political community. Yeah, that's why the John Paul II, he cracked down hard on priests that were in political roles. We had a priest in Congress, a Democrat, which was interesting. And he ordered, I think with pain of excommunication, or I don't know, it was pretty strong. He said, out. And he bawled out this guy in South America too. We've done it in the past. It was a bad idea. By engaging with these entities, the church, The church acknowledges the value of social and political realities and honors their specific responsibilities. I remember when Cardinal Burke was advising me, though, man, it sounded like it was straight from on high. He's like, well, you're a teacher, you're a musician. Said, God has raised up lawyers and politicians to deal with this specific situation. So pray for them and all that, but your job is to do what you've been called to do. So there is a place for that, and it's lay people in it. Supporting everything that fosters the well-being of individuals and strengthens the fabric of society. So in contrast, I would say that we also have the right to say things that weaken society, and that is not for the well-being of individuals. The church does not claim to assume the functions belonging to the state. Yeah, not anymore. On the contrary, she esteems those who serve the common good, and she firmly acknowledges the responsibility that civil institutions hold within society. I should say this. It wasn't always thus. It was a corruption. It was not a good thing when you saw the church holding political roles. Well, look at Cardinal Wolsey in England, and look how that turned out. On the contrary, she esteems those who serve the common good. Yay! And she firmly acknowledges the responsibility that civil institutions hold within society. At the same time, the mission entrusted to the church prompts her to address the real suffering of men and women of our time. And he talks about subsidiarity a little bit later. Subsidiarity is actually the position of the church. It was written about with Thomas Aquinas. He wrote it out really well. And that's, for example, what I do. If I want to serve the poor, guess what? I serve the poor, literally. Okay. And I am a supporter of the St. Vincent de Paul Society. This closeness does not stem from an intent to supplant civil institutions, much less from an implicit criticism of their work. Rather, it stems from evangelical charity, which impels the church to draw near to the wounds of humanity whenever they surface with greater severity. When the church intervenes, she does so following the example of the Good Samaritan. This is a good point. With discretion and closeness, aware that what arises from urgent necessity cannot become the norm, nor replace the institutional responsibilities proper to the civil community. Again, Good Samaritan, he assumes people know what he's talking about. So that's the way it's supposed to be. And anytime it seems otherwise, I've noticed it's because of selective reporting. I have very critical. I'll criticize both sides on this. That's why I think I'm just becoming neutral. You've got to look at the whole, and as much as you can, you have to look at the primary sources on everything. Whether it's this, whether it's movies, whether it's House of the Dragon, whatever. The wisdom of the Word of God in dialogue with the human sciences. The church regards all who sincerely seek truth, goodness, and beauty as companions on the journey. So if you seek truth, goodness, and beauty, okay, you're with us, and considers them as precious allies and defending the dignity of every person in caring for creation. So if you're with us on this, you're not against us. Nothing wrong with that. Adopting the pastoral approach of the Second Vatican Council, which invites us to listen, discern, and interpret the signs of the times. All right. We're supposed to listen, discern, and interpret the sign of the times. Maybe some clarity is needed here, but he doesn't give it. That's going to be a little bit of my broken record. Yes, we have to listen, discern. Now, one way that we discern, he doesn't say this, but discernment to us is where you discern the spirits. St. Ignatius of Loyola spoke of this. Is this the good spirit or the bad spirit? Is this the spirit of God or the spirit of someone else? Discern the spirits. Discern and interpret the signs of the times. Signs of the times, that's something that we talk about too. enlightened by the wisdom of the Word of God. The church is not afraid to encounter human knowledge. No, we're not. That's a myth. There were reasons why, for example, people among the Enlightenment wanted to do what they did. Why do you think the French Revolution was so violently horrendous? They had a mission. My gosh. Why do you think they always, when people want to destroy Western civilization, they go for this? Well, we're the biggest Western civilization institution, both from a human point of view and from a spiritual point of view. Indeed, the Word of God provides reliable standards for establishing passive justice and opening the ways of reconciliation and peace among peoples. When it comes to applying these standards to the complex situations of our time, the contributions of philosophy and the human and social sciences is essential. Now, that is where my vocation is. I am a social scientist. I have a full degree, a BA in history, just plain history, and I have several endorsements in, what was it? Well, anthropology, geography, Western civilization, American history, political science. Are there more? Maybe. I spent a lot of time in college. And music, but that's another area. Double major. These disciplines help us to analyze and understand and analyze cultural, economic, and political dynamics more deeply. St. John Paul II recalled the church welcomes the contributions of the social sciences in order to draw from them concrete insights that help her carry out her magisterial office. Yet we assist, not in place of. A dialogue with such kinds of knowledge does not diminish the power of the gospel. Okay? Doesn't diminish. It doesn't take the place. And we're talking about now the power of the gospel. On the contrary, he's assuming what the gospel is and just moves on. On the contrary, it makes it possible to identify with greater clarity what genuinely fosters the lives of individuals and communities. And we already mentioned the reason why he's not necessarily going deeper into these kind of things like the gospel, salvation, discernment, because he's talking about the social doctrine of the church. That's part of his thesis here. Okay, I'm keeping my on track. Following this perspective, Pope Francis emphasized that when dealing with many specific questions, the church does not claim to offer a definitive opinion. Keep that in mind. A lot of people, and I'm one of them, and I got to keep reminding myself of things that I've been teaching my entire life. Just because the Pope says something, that doesn't mean it's, for lack of a better word, gospel. Just because the Pope says something wrong, that shouldn't be a crisis of faith. It is a complete misunderstanding of what papal infallibility is. If you are not well catechized, and if you don't know the definition of papal infallibility, then you can maybe even have your faith shaken by this. Now, we were really, really spoiled by John Paul II and Benedict XVI, because boy, did they know how to talk, and boy, did they know how to speak to the world. Francis wasn't necessarily as good with it. And like I said, I'm still getting to know Leo. But yeah, you can disagree with the Pope all day. No problem with that. But when you're dealing with matters of faith and morals, no, you have to agree with the Pope. For example, when the Holy Father, Leo XIII, 14th, reminded everybody that the priesthood is only for men. All right. And about life issues and other social things. Yeah. On many of these questions, the church does not offer a definitive opinion, and that's why she welcomes debate on this. This is why I think social media has been a disservice on this, because that's not a good place to debate, but recognizes the importance of listening to scientific research and of encouraging a serious and honest debate among experts while welcoming a diversity of opinions. Yeah, we need to get back to the good old-fashioned debate. Well, remember that was one of the last things that Charlie Kirk did. He was in Oxford and they were debating it. And it's pretty cool. They get up there and they're wearing tuxedos and everything, really old fashioned, and they're just sitting there taking two different points of view. I think that we cannot underestimate the value of this. Nourished by this fruitful dialogue, and hopefully it's fruitful, between the gospel, here we go again, the gospel, and human knowledge. Gospel, it comes from God, human knowledge, human knowledge. The church has progressively developed her social doctrine. Again, we're talking about the social doctrine of the church, cultivating in history a wise patrimony marked by theological and anthropological coherence. Say that 10 times fast. Rooted in the Christian understanding of the person. So we have a theological and anthropological coherence rooted in Christian understanding of the person. So all of this is from the Christian understanding of the person, from the church, theology. Precisely because this patrimony, patrimony, oh dear, what a word, patrimony. We love it, but I know it triggers others. Arises from faith, and a corresponding vision of reality. We got to be in reality. It does not amount to a repertoire of technical solutions or an economic or political model to be set against others. Everyone needs to read Utopia. You're not going to have a technical solution to anything. But this doesn't mean that we don't engage with things that are technical and political and economic. Instead, it belongs to a different order. Okay, understand, kids? A different order. He used those words, didn't he? When somebody that rhymes with Trump tried to draw him into that, he did say, we're of a different order. Yeah. He was trying to treat him like a politician, and it's like, no, this is a different order. Interesting. And of course, he wrote this long before that happened. Or did he? I need to look it up. Namely, that of the principles that guide the interpretation of events and sustain an evangelical understanding of historical processes and the choices these entail. Herein lies the proper function of social doctrine, which does not claim to supplant the responsibilities of politics or institutions, but offers itself as a foundation for collective discernment. Again, collective discernment, helping to recognize and promote whatever serves the dignity of persons, the vitality of communities, and the common good. I think people misunderstand that when the Pope or even me or anyone in the church offers up something, it's not necessarily infallible or a proclamation or something. Sometimes we're just offering a proposition. My gosh, every time I try to engage with an issue, whether it's soccer or anything else, and I use devil's advocate, I almost have given up on using devil's advocate because people don't understand that even when I say devil's advocate, it's like they're not listening. It's that I've been trained. This is part of my training, and this goes along with St. Thomas Aquinas. What St. Thomas Aquinas would do is that you frame the opposite or objections to your position in a way to clarify your position. I always say if you want to kind of not have your brain explode, just go to the part of St. Thomas Aquinas when he says, but what I say is this, because that's his position. But that it is something that's like a dialogue. But, you should do a dialogue within yourself as well. It brings you to a higher level of thinking and it clarifies things. Social doctrine as a shared discernment. I need to keep my eye on the clock here. Understanding that the truth is a gift to be shared, the truth, not a possession to be monopolized, frees the church from the temptation of seeking forms of presence based on power. Yeah, it's a temptation of the church. It's a gift to be shared, not a possession to be monopolized. Okay. But not sure. Maybe he's talking to some critics there because that's not what we do or what we try not to do that. In order to rediscover the evangelical approach of a gentle proclamation of truth that is not imposed, St. John Paul II invited us to examine honestly the times when acquiescence was given to intolerance and even the use of violence in the service of truth. Yeah, he's talking about things like Inquisition and all of that. And when heresy was illegal and it was a sentence of death in some cases. That's why I'm saying, okay, kids, we've already dealt with this, right? I mean, sorry. If I'd have been there maybe 600 years ago, maybe I'd have done something about it, but maybe I wouldn't have, because I wouldn't have even known. And it was hard to become a heretic. It really was. Not that I'm justifying anything, but it's like, yes, we're done with that. In the same vein, I too have reaffirmed that the church does not claim to possess a monopoly on truth. Yeah, out of context, I could see how, oh boy, that could make people mad. Because we kind of do. But I know what he's saying. He's not talking about moral relativism here, but I can see how people could look at that and think that's where he's going. Truth is not a territory to be defended, but a good to be shared. What is truth is truth. It's not like, my truth and your truth. The truth is the truth. I'm nothing but the truth. I'm going to skip a little bit here. Time is greater than space. I'm not sure what that means. Help me out if anyone knows. What matters most is not occupying positions of power or defending cultural strongholds. Okay. What? I think I know what he's getting at, but yes, we need to defend cultural strongholds. Please do. We have to. Unless he's talking about a human, like defending it with armies and stuff, like the way it might have been in the past. But initiating good processes and enabling them to mature. Okay. In this way, the truth of the gospel is not imposed from above, but grows over time with the concrete interweaving of lives, communities, and cultures. Okay, I think he's talking about like forced conversion because it is from above, it's from God, but he's talking, I think, about imposed by the state. That's always a bad idea. This is not a truth that fears diversity. Unfortunately, every time, of course, I hear the word diversity, I get triggered. Good diversity, though, is not a problem, but instead welcomes and guides it. I'm thinking he's talking about good diversity. It does not eliminate conflicts, but transforms them. Yeah, we do not live with an absence of conflict. We need to look and interpret conflict. Why is there conflict? Where can we go and how can we move forward? We need to transform them. Okay, I've got you. I'm with you here, Father. Reuniting that which history tends to scatter. Yeah, history does tend to scatter. History is one long defeat. I love you, J.R. Tolkien, for this. This concept can also be illustrated by the image of a multifaceted polyhedron. Okay. In which the one truth of the gospel is reflected from different angles. Okay. He's saying one truth of the gospel. That's not relativism. There is the one truth of the gospel, but he's saying it's reflected from different angles. I could get on board with that. And he's using words like one truth of the gospel, which might actually make people mad who aren't Christians. It's like, well, I want to quote a comedian that once said, if you don't believe that what your church is teaching is the truth, then why are you there? Man, he is an Augustinian through and through. Well, look who it is. Well, yeah, and I think that that's what Salty Traveling see about that bad diversity. Yeah, and we need to be very, very cautious about this. What we're talking about here is in light of the social doctrine of the church. But yeah, he needs to use a different word because it's come to mean something very different. Yeah, because he's talking about we're going to look at the one truth of the gospel reflected from different angles. Yeah, when we're talking about diversity in the church, how do I say this? Like, it's kind of a bit of the diversity that I talked about earlier, or we talk about, the difference between Franciscans, Augustinians, and all that, that we have a great deal of diversity in the church, not necessarily cultural here. This attitude of openness to truth, which is at the same time both one and diverse, profoundly expresses the Catholicity of the church. Once again, Catholicity of the church. The critics of this document that said he doesn't talk about these things just either didn't read it or are engagement farming. For she embraces the entire human family, yet is also immersed in the concrete situations of people and cultures. Again, he's assuming that people understand Catholicese here. The Second Vatican Council reminds us that in virtue of this very Catholicity, each part contributes its own gifts to other parts and to the entire church. In this way, the church grows as a whole and as individual communities thanks to a mutual exchange and to shared efforts toward an ever fuller communion. It follows then that the people of God are not only gathered together from many peoples, but are also so intertwined through different functions, vocations, cultures, and traditions, each being called to support and enrich each other. The different function, yeah, that was like when Cardinal Burke was like, hey, you're not a lawyer, are you? Didn't you tell me you're a music teacher? Then you're supposed to be a music teacher and teach these children great music and to love great music. And he says, I started with kids. My preschool was the youngest that I was teaching. And he's like, you get them young, you get them loving it, then they will see truth, through music. J.R. Tolkien, he had God creating through music. Okay. He said, it's other people's jobs to be lawyers, it's other jobs to be priests, it's other, different religious orders. He's talking to Catholics here. And of course, we have different rights in the church, which is why, we are so concerned about things that are happening to our brothers and sisters in the rights over there, like in Gaza and the Middle East and Iran and all this. We have a right to be concerned about that. And even the Orthodox, though we're separated, we're still cousins. From this perspective, St. Paul VI acknowledged that given the variety of historical situations, it is unrealistic to think that the Church's social doctrine can propose a single response that is valid in all contexts. Yeah, there is not one solution. Okay, yeah, and he does get into Leo the 13th. He really gives us a deep dive into the church's social doctrine. For this reason, he invited each Christian community to interpret the reality of its own country with clarity and responsibility. Indeed. That's why I get cranky when people try to tell me, like, what we're supposed to do here in America that aren't Americans. It'd be as annoying as me trying to tell people in other countries what to do in their country. Though we can be with them, we can accompany them in our concerns for them, but each Christian community interprets the reality of its own country with clarity and responsibility. It's when the dignity of the people are being undignified, if you will. It's a problem. It's a problem that I've had. Even with people right now that I agree with, our politicians that I agree with right now, I have been always speaking out against the undue mockery and humiliation rituals that's been going on. That's not okay. The fruitful tension between the universality of the church's mission and her local roots is an intrinsic aspect of her life, for she encompasses the whole world while addressing the specific issues of each context as the real setting in which the gospel takes shape. Yeah, I've got some comments here. It is Tommy and the Guinea Pig Collective. Thank you. Yes, that's what I was talking about. I mean, it's just awful. Yeah, the Lebanese Christians. And I keep trying to tell people, and when you're a Catholic, you're not separated. I mean, what they're doing to them is as real to me as if the parish I go to were being blown up. And it's just so sad. Thank you, Tommy, for being here, and thank you for your support. Yes, was it if I get the name wrong, was it Slasher? That was his nickname. Everyone, please pray for him and his family. May he rest in peace. All right. In light of what has been said so far, the church's social doctrine can be seen more authentically. It is not a handbook of principles and norms to be applied, but a process of shared discernment. Yeah, and I've talked again before that discernment means something very specific in Catholicism. Man, boy, do I pray for discernment every day, discernment of the spirits. And is this the good spirit or the bad spirit? It is born from the encounter between the eternal truth of the gospel and the questions of history. Once again, I don't see him watering this down. It allows itself to be challenged by the signs of the times and draws nourishment from the contributions of science, cultural, and human experience. Therefore, and whenever someone says, what's it there for? You ask what it's there for. When the dignity of our brothers and sisters is violated, when politics fails to address the tragedies of humanity, when the economy turns against the person or science oversteps the limits of its competence, all right? And this is where the church has to step in. I mean, for crying out loud, most of my adult life, there was the whole Mittler's Pope thing going on, the fact that we didn't single-handedly take him out. The church didn't. Of course, there was a lot of misinformation about what really happened, but still, it's just like, okay, do you want us to step in or don't you? But yeah, when the dignity of our brothers and sisters is violated, politics fails to address the tragedies of humanity, and when the economy turns against the person or science oversteps the limits of its competence, the church, together with other Christian denominations and believers of other religions, must make her voice heard, not in order to dominate, but to promote communion. Yeah, not trying to dominate, but to promote communion. Sometimes also we as Americans can sometimes be within ourselves and think that it's all about us. A lot of the time, he's not even talking about us. I remember people were like, oh my gosh, here he goes again talking about America. Oh no, the alarm went off. Okay, but all right, it's all good. Man, that startled me. And he was actually talking about warlords in Africa when you looked at what he was talking about. How do I say this? A priest once said this to us about people that were like, oh, I don't know. I don't want to go to confession. I'm going to be saying things. And he said a little bit sarcastically, maybe he shouldn't have, but it stuck with me. He said, believe it or not, your lives are not that exciting. That was a way of him saying it. He's heard it all. Understood in this way, social doctrine becomes a theology of communion in history, a history in which the Word made flesh, that's Christ, continues to be present through dialogue, memory, and prophecy. Again, we hear the word dialogue and we get triggered. I get triggered. Memory. Okay, prophecy. Yes. I wish he would be a little clearer here. Like, what is, but okay. The Word made flesh, that's Jesus, continues to be present through dialogue, memory, and prophecy. Unless he's saying like the Holy Spirit is working through all of this. I think that's where he's going with. Quit being such an Augustinian. But, oh well. Speaking of which, my alarm did go off. That means I do have to go because I have an appointment. Yes, Slasher. That was his name. Okay. Yes. His nickname, of course. Yes. Prayers for his family. Yes. Slasher and prayer for his family. Yes. May he rest in peace. Requiescat in pace. And if I mispronounce this, remember, I don't usually say that. I usually sing it. Qui tollis peccata mundi dona eis requiem, dona eis requiem. That's the song. That's what I sing at funerals. But time for me to go. I hope this helps you understand. And again, yeah, a lot of Catholicese here, and hopefully I helped Catholicsplain it. So we're going to get into Leo the 13th and what that means. Rerum Novarum was a great work. Now, one thing you got to keep in mind with Leo the 13th, part of Rerum Novarum was a very, very strong condemnation of socialism, communism. So, Marxism. So we need to put that all into context as well. My gosh. Again, with all my stuff with Thomas More, Utopia needs no place, all of that. It's just really fascinating to me. And like I said, I'm getting to know this encyclical. You're reading it with me or commenting with me, reviewing it so far. I think I get where he's going. I maybe get this an 8 out of a 10 because, like I said, it's so Augustinian. I almost can't stand it, but I know what he's saying. Also, keep in mind that the Holy Father is talking to the bishops of the world. That's what encyclicals are for. It really is kind of in modern times that we kind of started to think about encyclicals being for everybody. He's assuming that people know the language. But yes, definitely from the worldly point of view, what you were saying, salty traveling sea, indeed. And we need to, of course, be careful of that because it will be the death of us. Oh, I just saw this. Oh, Purple Valkyrie, she's doing as well as anyone can be in diverse England. Yeah, and again, that's what I'm saying is I wish the Holy Father wouldn't use the word diverse because it is a triggering word. It is a triggering word. Now, we'll get into this as we see it, I don't think he's talking about the diversity that is destroying all of our churches and desecrating the Eucharist and all of that. Again, I do like the fact that I think that he does have the ear of people that Francis was not always necessarily willing to listen to. And we shall see. Gotta go. I wish I didn't. This is making me think. And when I think, things get dangerous, but I do need to go. So have a great day. Oh, please continue praying for my sister. As you all know, she has cancer and is going through chemotherapy. Again, this is like the 3rd time. Oh, it's awful. So please pray for her. She always asks for those Catholic prayers, but she'll take any prayers. She always comes to Catholics because she's like, you guys are the professionals. But of course, she said she'll take everything right now. So not just Christian, she's just joking, incense, tree hugging, whatever it is. But definitely, please, if you all would keep her in prayers. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Tommy, thank you for my mods, Snorpoops Kuber, Stieg. Thank you. I think Bully Dog was in here, and anyone that I missed. I just got to go, Shansu. Thank you for your support for my channel. Have a great day, everyone, and be certain to discern the spirits.